So take it away, Roger.
Hi, everybody. Now then, I'm going to divide this talk into three sections. The first one being why, the second one being how, and the third one being anything else I can think of. The reason why I went for the kind of calling that I did probably stemmed out of a midlife crisis I had in 1989 when I gave up the day job and took on the role of what was actually described as a folk development worker. At that time, a number of regions in England got Arts Council funding to set up folk development projects. And most of those took the stance that what their job was to improve the marketing for what already went on and get more people in that way. I took a slightly different stance and thought, right, how can we adapt what we are doing in a way that it will be attractive to a wider and different group of people? And one of the things that it did actually allow me to do was to look at people who'd been to various folk events and not enjoyed them and find out why. When it came to Ceilidhs, there were two main reasons. And when I came to think about them, they're very accurate. One was that they came to hear music. And quite often there was more of the evening, somebody actually timed one without music than with music. And secondly, people said, but were we really dancing? Or were we just following instructions while some music was being played? And looking at it quite brutally, I think they had a point. Now, the thing was that before the midlife crisis, as well as being a caller, I'd been a caller for 20 years, but parallel to that, I'd been a modern languages teacher. And I thought, right, what do we do? Because that's something else that in England we're very unsuccessful at getting people really enthusiastic about, is speaking foreign languages. And I had taught in the same way that I had learned, which was by giving a series of grammar rules and lists of vocabulary and expecting people to put those together and go and speak a language. And I knew from my own experience that that didn't work. And when I got to thinking about it, that's to some extent what I was doing as a Ceilidh caller as well. I was giving people a load of instructions, and then suddenly music started, and I was expecting them with a few prompts from me, sort of like a phrase book, if you're drawing the modern languages parallel. And what was the difference? When did modern language learning or language learning really happen? And the answer was with immersion, when you're actually in it. So what do we need for immersion with dance? And the answer is rhythm. And that, I thought, well, that's a good way of getting some more music into it, instead of calling, giving instructions, and then expecting the music to start and people to fit the instructions to it. Why doesn't the music start and we actually fit the description of the dance to some kind of music going on, or at least rhythm? So that's what I decided to do. And I also decided that the nature of the tradition I was trying to continue wasn't quite what I had been doing as a set caller with a number of bands, predominantly one or two, mainly that I played with as well. And that was, I had described to an audience a number of dancers which were sequences of figures which had been given names either by the people who did them in their own communities or by the people who collected them. Now, was that the tradition or was that the history? And if that was the history, what was the tradition? The tradition was that we dance in these islands in spatial relationship to a group of people. And that's what I wanted to try and get over. And I came to the decision that I would rather call simple sequences of figures than just teach something that had been given a name one way or another. And most of the community work that I didn't actually call dancers by specific names. I called a sequence of figures. Maybe I'd give it a name at the end or something like that. And I also decided, not particularly with people, when I had a load of people who, by and large, hadn't done this kind of dancing anymore, I wouldn't actually give even a figure a name until I'd described how it was done. And I'll give you an illustration. What I'm going to do for the how is I'm going to ask you to use your imaginations, because I'm going to call a dance. You can roll your carpets back if you want to, but be careful. So I'm going to do what I would do. Now, I was very lucky for the last 20 years of my career in that I led a band which had certainly two of the best drummers I've ever met, and possibly two of the best dance drummers in the world, one African and one Indian. And we spent a lot of time working out which African and Indian rhythms, or combinations of the two, went best for the English dance rhythms. And so what I could do, for instance, then, was I could ask my drummers, if I was working with my own band, right, can you play such and such? And my call would start as soon as I got the formation on the floor. The only time there was no music was when I was actually getting people up into sets. And then the music would start almost immediately. It may have started with the drummers, or if I wasn't working with a band with drummers that I knew quite so well, or rhythms I could name quite so well, I would start a chant. And there were some drummers, notably Sam McAvoy with Lisa's father's band, Moondance, who was absolutely brilliant and could pick a rhythm up from the chant that I was doing. And another reason I decided to do it like this was I did some school workshops and called the dancers that they wrote for them, and in a school ceilidh. And one of the kids came up to me afterwards and said, you know that rap that you do to get us to do the things? Can I learn how to do that? And I thought, well, yes, actually, this is what it is. It is rap. So imagine a drum beat has started, a 4/4 drum beat for a polka or a reel. And so I begin, right? Okay, then. Get your bodies moving to this beat and start yourselves thinking in groups of 8, because in this kind of dancing, there's a magic number, and the number is 8, and everything is going to happen in multiples or divisions of 8 beats. And it goes like this. If you're thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, that's great. Now, what you're going to do to the first 8 beats of this dance, and don't do it till I tell you to, you're going to dance 4 beats forward, 4 beats back. Are you ready? Let's try it now. Dance forward, 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 and back again. Now, you're in 2 lines of 4, because this is a 4 couple long ways set. And one of these lines is going to lift their hands to make a series of arches. They're going over and the others are going under. So you change places, go 1 and 2, and the one's going under. It really helps if you let go each other's hands. Now turn and face the way you've come. I'm going to do all that again, starting with the forward and back. And this time, the other line are going to make the arches. So go 1, forward, 2, 3, forward, 2 and 3 and 4, and back again. Now the archers, over you go, and all of a sudden you're back to the place where you started from. Now reach your right hand out, come a little bit close to the person opposite you. Take right hands. Now you're going to dance once round each other until you get back to your place. And how many beats are you going to take? I bet you know it's going to be 8. So to me, it's an obvious way. We used to call it clockwise, but then we got digital. But I'm sure you'll do it. Are you ready? Go with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and you're back where you started. Now change hands. We call that a right hand turn. Bet you can't do a left hand turn, but you're going the other way around. Are you ready? Go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Now the couple nearest me, in each group of 4 couples, we're going to give you a name. You call the head couples, but you don't get a badge because you're not going to be there for very long. Now, you've got left hands to each other. Give right hands as well. So you're holding by crossed hands. Lean back a bit and you'll find you can swing round each other. Round you go, swinging. And as you're swinging, you're going to move down to the other end of the line. And when you get there, stay there. Are you ready? So swing. You've got 16 beats to do it in. So really make a meal of it. Swing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, 7 and 8. Are you ready? Get into your lines on the side. We'll do it all again. We'll string it together this time. Ready? Dance forward, 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 and back again. Make the arch, cross over. 2, 3, 4. Turn and face. Now do all that again. Go forward, back again, and through the arch again until you're right back to your place. Right hand turn, right hand out for the right hand turn. You're dancing round, back with the left hand now. 2, 3, 4. Couple this end. Cross hands and swing to the bottom, and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Get in the lines on your side, and we're ready to do it all again. Now, by this time, not just the drummers, but everybody else in the band would be in, probably without any melody happening. In fact, I would reckon that if I called like that and I kept the sequences, at least to begin with, quite easy, that I wouldn't have to actually call for more than 3 or maximum 4 times through the dance, by which time they were dancing to the rhythm. And the melody, when it came in, would probably just be there to remind them of the rhythm or to describe the shape and figure sequence of the dance. But in fact, certainly in the most of the bands I worked with in the latter part of my life, melody didn't figure that often. I basically had musicians who could improvise. So it was even more important that the dancers could actually were dancing to a rhythm rather than to a tune, so that gave the musicians freedom to really let fly. I mean, on my YouTube channel, there's one particular track that was in fact done at an expert scale at IFTV in 2006, where I started off, I think I played the melody through twice, and then I handed over to my tenor sax player, who was a Nigerian guy called Zem Audu. And after his 32 bars, he was absolutely flying. So I just gave him the sign to carry on. And basically, I came in for the last 2 B musics. And that was all I needed to do. But the dancers didn't actually falter from phrasing the dance to the music at all through the whole of that dance. And so that's how. Obviously, I'm sure some of you will say, but how would you do such and such a dance with that? The answer is I wouldn't. As I say, particularly, I mean, in festivals and at ceilidh clubs, I would announce the dancers by name, but most of the dances I did were actually dancers that had been created in workshops that I'd led. And so, although they might have had names that had been given to them by the workshop participants, they wouldn't necessarily be names that the audience or the dancers rather would recognise. And if people came up and requested certain dancers, because one of the things that I did find, this is certainly into any other business now, is that often in even a community event, you'd get some people who thought they knew what to do, while giving them a completely different emphasis. In other words, an emphasis on actually dancing to the rhythm, moving their bodies in a way that the rhythms actually suggested, rather than just walking a set of complicated patterns on the floor. They actually had something that they hadn't done before, just the same as the people who'd not been to many ceilidhs, or if any at all, had something to do in trying to remember what the figures were and the sequences. So everybody was to some extent equalized, even the experts. And if somebody came up to me and said, and requested a particular dance, what I would tend to do would be to say, what do you particularly like about that dance? Which figure do you like best in that dance? Why do you want to do that one? And I'd say, well, I won't necessarily do that dance, but I will do a dance with that figure in it, or with those two figures in it. And the important thing, I think, the important things to stress for me are that the actual command word, as you probably gathered from my calling through, the actual words of the description of the next figure comes on the last 4 beats of the sequence before. I tried to keep even the actual chanting in 8-beat phrases, if I could, or multiples of 8. And the last 4 beats would be the actually telling the audience what was, or telling the dancers what was going to happen next, so that they were prepared, rather than sort of suddenly shout or gabble in the last second what the next figure was going to be. So it prepares, and it also means that it's flowing, and also because you've gone straight from I won't call it a walkthrough, but an interrupted dance through, a piece by piece dance through, because I've gone straight from that into another time through. The most important thing, which I think is the transition between one time through the dance and the next time through the dance, has already been practiced. Whereas if what you do is just walk things through once, it's always a bit of a surprise for the dancers when the next time through comes, and if they've been concentrating so much on trying to remember what happens in 32, 48, or 64 bars, they're not really prepared for when it all starts again. So that was something which I found this way of calling actually allowed to happen, and that people were more prepared for the start of the next sequence. Now, obviously, you can't just walk into a ceilidh with a band you've never worked with before and do this. You've got to get the band on your side, at least by if nothing else, going to at least one band rehearsal and getting them to do what I've just done, but play the music to it as well. And if it's a band without a drummer, surely there'll be a rhythm section player somewhere who can do something, even if what they do is just vamp on one chord while you do that first section. I mean, what I would do if I was the only musician, because I did do quite a few ceilidhs that was just me and a melodeon, and I was playing the melodeon as well as doing the calling, is once I'd got the actual first time through going, I would start by vamping the chords underneath my own call. So I was sort of almost like accompanying myself at the song, and gradually go from that to something more melodic. And again, a band, if you've worked with them, will be able to do that. Certainly, Moondance did, and other bands that I worked with for any length of time. They would be able to pick up the rhythm in such a way that little improvised phrases that may or may not have related to the melody would start coming in, and the second or third time through, and then by the time I was ready to actually stop calling, they were ready to play the actual melody, if that's what they were there, if that was the way they worked. As I say, with my own band, I would probably, the first time through, I might play the melody, or the first time through again, I might just reinforce the chord sequence, so that I myself could check, as it were, that even without my call, the dancers were dancing to the rhythm, and rather than just trying to remember the instructions. And obviously, I could tell by the way that body movements were happening rather than just walking, what was going on, and whether the actual rhythm had been absorbed. But surely we are about making movements to rhythm in sequences. That's the tradition that I celebrate, at any rate. And as I say, whether it's got particular names that come from particular villages in England at particular times or not, I don't really mind. As I say, I'm basically, my objective is to preserve and perpetuate a tradition, not run a historical reenactment society.